Okay, well, then let's move on to fan announcements. We have some projects that are upcoming and ongoing, and so we thought it would be a good time to share. So Todd, if you'd like to, you could go ahead and start with the June Prune.
All right, thanks. Yeah, well, on our friendly website and out in the newsletter and the more recent friendly flyer, you may have seen announcements for the June Prune event, and something that the friendly neighborhood transportation team that I am the chair of is helping put together. It's an idea that spawned out of work that Southeast Neighbors did last year, and we liked the concept and adopted it for this year. So June 18th, that's the Saturday before Father's Day, we're going to be hosting an event in cooperation with Toolbox Project and some other entities to get out and trim overgrown vegetation from the sidewalks. And there's information about this. The main thing is, I'm going to put up in the chat here. Let me pause and make sure that looks good. Yes. I've got a short URL that takes you right to the sign up sheet. We have a Google form, and if you can share that out with your friends and neighbors. If the main outreach is folks who are maybe elderly or immobile or have some other problems being able to attend to their own pruning, it's neighbors helping neighbors, getting out there and helping them trim back this vegetation. It's also a way to really communicate and educate the neighborhood as a whole, because many of us are unaware that you are responsible for the vegetation that grows under the sidewalk, just like you're responsible for the sidewalk in front of your home. And whether to debate that or not, that's for a different issue, a different topic for a different time. But you are responsible for that. And there's actually complaints could be made to the city, which may be favorable in some cases, for the city to go out and attend to that and notify the landowner. But we want to do the neighborly thing and let people know that it is important, thinking about people using wheelchairs, passing side by side, stroller users, anybody who's tall, and there's actually a 9-foot clearance over the sidewalk that's required by code. And I asked city staff about that, and they said, well, they figured the tallest person on a bicycle that might be going through to not be impacted. And you think the branches way down a little bit. So it doesn't have to be 9 feet, 0 inches, but any low hanging branches. The important thing here is that we do want to be mindful that city street trees are their own category, and the city does not want you trimming those, and we're not going to trim those, but we're going to compile a list for the city so that city staff can go and effectively go and hit those. And the Toolbox Project is going to be lending out hedge trimmers and pruners, and we really want you to sign up for Toolbox Project if you're not already aware of the Toolbox Project, and borrow some tools and continue doing this on your own. So there's going to be a lot more information. I've been advertising it as an 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. event, a day of June Prune. The bulk of the work, the volunteer activity that we're going to coordinate is going to be from 9 to noon. So don't think that you have to dedicate your whole day to it. What we like to do is get volunteer groups out there, helping neighbors out, hitting up some of these areas. And we're also going to be looking at focusing at LTD bus stops and safe routes to schools, and doing some outreach there before the June 18th event. And one final thing that I just lost my train of thought is, I guess, yeah, moreover in the afternoon to get people to keep going. And then we can enjoy the clear sidewalks all summer long. So if you have any questions on that, let me know. Otherwise, stay tuned for more information.
Right. Thanks, Todd. Nancy, would you care to do?
Yes. So I'm Nancy Bray, the FAN board and with the Equity Action Team, and we have several activities going on right now. So back in 2018, we first designed and printed our very popular FAN yard sign that says, "All are welcome here, honoring diversity and human rights." And every year since then, we have reprinted 100 a year. That we still get lots of requests for those yard signs. So we need to reprint again this year. However, this is the first time that we do not have in our FAN outreach budget enough money to print 100 signs, which is what is most cost effective. So we are raising money to reprint the signs. And Friendly Street Market is helping us out. So they are hosting on May 21st, Saturday, a 5% donation day, which means all purchases anytime that day, Saturday, May 21st, at either store in FAN or in Springfield, then 5% of what's brought in that day, they will donate for our yard signs. So a big thank you to Friendly Street Market for helping us out. Our other big project is the Kalapuya Wetlands project at Westmoreland Park. And we had an article in the FAN newsletter and also in Friendly Flyer, but just to tell you, mural painting did start this week on the 2 days when it wasn't raining. And so you can already see the mural appearing there on the east wall, which is really nice because you can see this mural from Polk Street. Our other murals, you know, on the south and the west side aren't quite as visible to anybody just driving by. So this one is very visible and it overlooks the wetland right there that we are working on restoring. So a couple of things to let you know, we've had a series of work parties to restore the wetland there. And our next work party is on Saturday, June 11th. On April 30th, we had 20 volunteers come out, including 5 from Lane United Football Club, which was really cool. And so I hope people can join us on June 11th, be from 9 to 11. Also, we are anticipating that the project will be completed by the end of June, and the honoring ceremony is scheduled for Saturday, July 9th. And we'll be putting out an announcement about that. So I should say the Kalapuya Wetlands project is a joint project with Beyond Toxics. And they've just been really amazing to work with. So come on by, check out our mural appearing, and I hope you can join us for some restoration. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. Thea, do you have anything for Ready Friendly?
Ready Friendly. We're very excited to be able to join Pathfinder X on May 22nd in Alton Baker Park, doing a citywide disaster preparedness exercise open to anybody and aimed towards neighborhoods and teams and organizations to go there and get free training and a free lunch. And I'll put the link in the chat for how to do that. Our radio group is really growing. We have like 53 people on the getting the monthly information and averaging about 20 FRS participants each second Sunday net, and maybe 8 or 10 hams. So we're really excited after a year and a half that we're getting such regular attendance. I can't keep the ground crew from setting up on the reservoir. They insist on doing it no matter the weather, just for the practice. So they're there if you want to go up on the reservoir on the second Sunday and say hello. Thank you, Margie.
Thank you. And so just a quick shout out. In the fall is when we elect new board members. And so this is just kind of an FYI to invite you to join any board meetings if you want to listen in to what we're doing. These reports kind of tell you, you know, what some of the committees are doing. And so we, of course, are happy to have, you know, any new interested people to join the board. So be thinking about that, and there'll be some announcements coming out as well. But just a heads up. Okay, well, now I think we are ready for our presenters. I'm really happy to introduce our speakers from Northwest Center for Alternatives to Pesticides, NCAP. Laura Ray is the communications manager, and Ashlety Chesser is co-director of fundraising and operations. And so they'll share with us tonight ways we can move towards more ecologically balanced yards and gardens. So thank you very much for coming and sharing tonight with us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having us. Hello again, I'm Ashlety Chesser. I'll kick us off and then I'll be passing to Laura. We're going to kind of tag team back and forth throughout the presentation. So yes, we're NCAP, the Northwest Center for Alternatives to Pesticides. We've been around for 45 years now. This is our 45th anniversary. And we work to promote safe pest and weed solutions for healthy people and environment. We've got 3 program areas that are listed there on your screen. And we conduct our work by presenting educational information, researching new alternatives to pesticides, and advocating for better policies and implementation of safe solutions. Track forward, Laura. Yeah, like I said, we've been around since 1977. We started as a grassroots organization that was fighting back against aerial spraying in the Triangle Lake area around near Veneta. A lot of people were getting sick, farm animals were dying, and we wanted to make a difference in the practices for kind of the logging practices in that area. And so that's how we got started, and we formed together as a bunch of different grassroots community groups around the Northwest, and became a nonprofit entity in 1977. So today I'm going to start off by giving you the basics of pesticides. Before we jump into healthy solutions, I'm going to give you just a little bit of information about pesticides and try and keep it short. And then we'll jump into kind of what the alternatives are and how to get involved. So basics of pesticides. So what is a pesticide? So any agent that is specifically designed to kill an organism that's deemed a pest. So the phrase pesticide, we use it as an umbrella term for a bunch of different kinds of chemicals, including herbicides, insecticides, rodenticides, fungicides. So when we say pesticide, we're not just talking about pests, we're talking about anything that's designed to kill one of those things. Technically, a fly swatter is also a pesticide by that definition. It's designed specifically to kill a pest. So which ones are we concerned about? You can do the next slide, perfect. Synthetic chemical agents that are toxic for the larger environment. So it might target a specific pest, but it's persistent in the environment and can be hazardous to human and environmental health. So these are the things that we're concerned about and that we're looking to provide alternatives around. So why should we be concerned about those, synthetic pesticides? What's the problem? Well, first off, 1.2 billion pounds of them are used in the United States every year. That's an estimate by the EPA. And a lot of those pesticides are running off into our waterways. 97% of urban streams are contaminated with pesticides to some extent, and 83% of those urban streams have pesticide levels that exceed benchmarks set to protect fish and wildlife. And interestingly, urban streams actually have higher concentrations often than agricultural areas because people kind of carelessly use them sometimes in urban environments. They apply more than they need to, whereas in agriculture, they might be a little bit more sparing because of the cost. So it's not just a farming issue, it's a community issue. Everyone can get involved in reducing use and helping protect waterways. But aside from fish, pesticides are also hazardous to our pollinators. Insects generally are shown to be in decline. 40% in a recent study are now kind of dropping so dramatically, we expect them to be in a threatened category sometime soon. We need our pollinators to grow food. I think a lot of people are now kind of in alignment with the message that we need to save the bees. If we lose our pollinators, we're in big trouble. And it's also hazardous to human health. So even if you're not super concerned about the environment, wildlife, it is hazardous potentially to your pets if you're using pesticides at home, and then also to your own health and to the health of your family. So, acute poisoning. So if you had a large dose that you were exposed to, or a small dose over a long period of time can cause these different health impacts. So there's some bullet points there. I think the ones that have been in the news a lot recently are around cancer, and then birth defects for children born in either, close proximity to farms or, children of mothers who are farm workers. And so these are concerns. Keep going. So what are a few common culprits? Glyphosate or Roundup is the most commonly used herbicide. And it's one that people are more and more familiar with, as it's been in the news a lot, and there's been a lot of lawsuits. Again, there's a lot of these kind of immediate concerns if you were exposed to a lot of it, like irritation to the skin, nausea, and those kinds of things. But we're seeing really like long-term, pretty serious health impacts, and people developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so there's been a bunch of lawsuits recently for landscapers and other herbicide applicators. So that's one common one that you've probably heard of. Another that we're happy to see being phased out is chlorpyrifos. This is pretty much an agricultural insecticide. And we've been working with a coalition of other groups and individuals trying to get this one banned. And we finally, last year, had a ban at the federal level for all food uses. So this is a huge victory. This isn't one that you generally could get on the shelf in the store, but has been used really heavily by certain farm crops. Strawberries is one where it was really heavily used. So this is a big win for farm workers and for our own health. We're not going to be eating it in small doses anymore in our food. But it is still allowed on some other non-food uses like golf courses and then Christmas trees. So there's still potential that you could bring home a Christmas tree that's been treated with this pesticide. And especially for kids, that's really kind of scary, as it can cause brain damage if you've got a lot of exposure to it over some time. So we're still working to get that usage of it banned. But that's another one that's been on our radar recently. And excuse me, and the neonicotinoids or neonics, this is become the most widely used insecticide in the world, and one that we're currently trying to get banned. It's called a systemic pesticide. I'll get into what that means in a second. But it's being, pre-treated onto seeds, it's being sprayed onto food, and it's in a lot of products that you can bring home. So products that are used to treat aphids, other kind of whiteflies, small insects on roses and other kind of ornamental shrubs and trees. So it is out there and it is still being heavily used, and it's one that's really impacting pollinator health. And yeah, like I said, it's a systemic pesticide. So neonics and other systemics work by being absorbed into the plant, which is helpful for the plant because then if any bugs try and munch on it, they're going to die. But it also means that it's released later into the pollen and the nectar of the plant. And so bees and other pollinators will eat it, and they'll either get, a small dose, and it can lead to the kind of a weakening of their system. They're not as able to fight off other pests and diseases, or if it's a large enough dose, it can cause them to die, pretty quickly. And so systemic pesticides, are really dangerous for that reason. They're not something that's going to disappear quickly in the environment. It's going to stay in these plants and continue to cause harm for a long time. So one thing we're encouraging people to do is make sure that the pollinator plants that you bring home aren't actually poisoning the bees and pollinators in your community. So there's a few nurseries there that we've identified in this area that have committed to only sourcing plants or growing plants that are neonic free. We're working on adding more to our list. We've got a list online. And then if you're, at any other nursery that's not one of these, you can ask them, do they know what their suppliers are using to grow their ornamental plants and their other flowering plants? Do you know that they're not pre-treated with neonics? And if you find out that there's a nursery that has committed to doing that, we would love for you to let us know so we can add it to our list. We don't have too many in the Eugene area right now, so it'd be great if we had a few more to add.
So Ashley, while I'm kicking off the next part, do you want to actually put the link for the page on our website where you can find that list of neonic-free nurseries, and you can also get our contact information in case you find a nursery that we could add or contact.
Yep, sounds great. All right, so you're thoroughly convinced now you're not going to use pesticides, or if you are, you're going to be checking the labels, making sure that it's not systemic. And you want to still manage your weeds and pests, though. This doesn't mean that you have to live with lots of damage to your plants or nuisances in your house. So I'm going to pass to Laura. We're going to start talking about those alternatives.
Yes. So what's the alternative? So this part, we're going to try to focus on things that you can do at home in your yard or garden if you have one. So you might have heard of IPM, or integrated pest management, which this pyramid here shows sort of the general principles of IPM, which you can use for pests, but also weed issues. So it's basically a big fancy name for this pretty simple step, starting at the bottom, which is prevention is the best thing that you can do first to try to prevent pests or weeds from becoming an issue. And then right at the top of the pyramid, in that small triangle that's red, is chemical methods, which would be synthetic pesticides, which is what we would consider the last resort. So I'll get into that a bit more. So these are a few of the common principles of IPM. Again, prevention of pest or weed issues in the first place is really the best thing you can do. And part of prevention is monitoring and correctly identifying pests. If you're able to monitor pest populations over time, you can determine if there's actually sufficient numbers of a certain insect or pest that could actually pose damage before you go ahead and reach for some of these other tools of controlling a pest. You want to monitor and know how much of an issue you really have. You want to deal with problems early, which fits in with the prevention piece, and establish thresholds of action. And that basically means you want to set a threshold or a point at which further damage is to your home, your garden, or maybe something that you're growing in your garden. If further damage is intolerable, something that you wouldn't tolerate, and you need to take some sort of action. So if you establish a threshold at which you need to take action after doing your monitoring, then you know when to take action and avoid taking more drastic measures only until a threshold is reached, and maybe you move a bit higher on that pyramid if you need to. You want to try non-hazardous approaches first, of course. And, even if you feel that you need to go to the top of that pyramid at some point to use a pesticide, NCAP definitely doesn't recommend using pesticides, but if that's a choice that you make, then we really encourage you to try to find something that's less hazardous, and read the labels really carefully if you're going to use a chemical, and look for OMRI or another label that's for organic use, preferably. And again, the main point here is that we're really encouraging you to think about pesticides as a last resort, that little bit at the top of the pyramid that hopefully you won't need to reach for. You can use some of these other tools and principles first. So I'll talk a little bit more about each of those principles. So prevention. So first, before you even feel like you need to deal with a pest, it's important to think about what is a pest. Most species of living things aren't really pests, but they're part of a larger ecosystem. And usually pest or weed problems result from an imbalance in that ecosystem. So if you're able to understand the root cause and restore some balance to the ecosystem, then you might not have certain weeds popping up in your yard if you, say, provide a nutrient that's needed. Designed to minimize pests. So if you're thinking about your yard and say you can design it so that you're planting a variety of native flowers and other plants, you can not only have a source for pollinators, but reduce the need for pesticides because you're encouraging those native plants that are adapted to your local climate and environment, which ideally require less pesticides because they're locally adapted. Companion plantings are also a great design element that you can use to reduce pests or other issues. And lastly, I just wanted to mention leaving the leaves in the fall. I know it's not the right season for this, but if you don't already, we encourage you to think about, instead of bagging up your leaves for removal from your yard in the fall, leave those leaves on the ground and use them as mulch in your garden beds or around trees, which helps to suppress weeds and also is a really great fertilizer. So the next step up from prevention is cultural/sanitation methods. So these are a couple examples here. One thing that's really important if you have, say, an ant problem in your house or rodents or some other pests or insects that are getting into your house, it's really important to keep shrubbery and tree branches away from your house so that pests don't have an easy conduit to get to your house and to get in little cracks and openings. Another benefit to keeping trees trimmed back from your house and from your roof is that that can help reduce moss growth on your roof, which is also something that people often use chemicals to treat on their roofs, unfortunately. So if you're able to keep trees trimmed back, then there's less leaves and other debris falling on your roof and less chance that moss will be growing there. And then the second tip here is about if you have holes or cracks, even small ones in your home, try to fill those with caulking or steel wool, something that's pest proof, which sort of goes in, is a preventative measure, but we have it here as well to hopefully avoid the need for a pesticide and make sure those pests don't get into your home. So the next step up in the IPM pyramid is physical or mechanical methods of control. And this slide actually focuses on weeds rather than pests. I know that I definitely have some weed issues in my yard. Does anyone else have issues with weeds in their yard? Yeah. So, if you're using a hand tool or a more specialized weeding tool, you really want to try to get to the root, get the root out of a weed. There are some weeds such as flatweed or others where it's really important that you get as much of the root out as possible so that they don't vegetatively grow back. And to try to catch weeds really early before they seed, and also when they're smaller. Heat or steam is a great way to control weeds where that's appropriate. There's a photo of that here. That's also a good reason to try to be more proactive with your weeding and get to plants early when they're smaller, because the heat or steam is more effective on smaller weeds, killing the plant rather than larger ones. Sheet mulching is definitely another thing that I've seen throughout the friendly neighborhood and other areas of Eugene. If you have an area of your yard that you want to convert from grass or that's just overtaken by weeds, doing sheet mulching with layers of cardboard and such can be a nice way just to have a fresh start and to take care of those weeds without having to do that manually. And then the last part of the pyramid I want to touch on is biological control measures. So this photo here is actually from a farm, but it can be done on a smaller scale in a yard too. And the basic idea is you're planting things that flower and attract good bugs. So not only is that food and habitat for pollinators, but you can also attract natural predators for other things that you do consider pests. You could also buy or introduce those natural predators. You can buy ladybugs, lacewings, other beneficial insects that are predators for other pests, such as if you have an aphid problem in your garden, you could introduce those natural predators. So with that overview of the IPM pyramid, I wanted to talk about 4 different alternatives to a traditional grass lawn. And these are just 4 examples. I wanted to ask, though, if a show of hands for folks that have part or maybe all of their yard, if you have a yard that is not a traditional grass lawn. Yay, awesome. Does anyone want to put something in the chat about what you have in your yard that you're really proud of? Or I want to, if anyone wants to come off mute and just share briefly what they have going on in your yard. I'm not sure I can see the chat right now with my screen sharing.
I'll say a few things.
Yeah.
Let's see, rock garden, dry bed stream with other rocks and plants, and even repurpose some sidewalk surfaces that were taken out of the house next door. They were going to throw out when they replaced the sewer because they had to install new sidewalks. So I got the forklift to bring it over to our yard, and that increased the driveway length or width to make that wider for accessibility and other things. So got rid of a lot of grass that way.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so I'm glad to hear that you guys have different things going on that are less of the traditional grass lawn. You know, grass lawns are monocultures of grass, and they often, people, homeowners, landscapers, often use a lot of different types of pesticides and synthetic fertilizers and water to maintain those landscapes. So, so I wanted to just share a few ideas that some pretty pictures to look at for if you're thinking about converting more of your yard to something that's not grass, if you have a yard. So eco lawns use a ground cover that could be something like clover, wildflower, or an eco lawn seed mix. And as you can see in this picture, they can look really nice, especially when they're flowering. They're a source of food for bees and other pollinators, and they require less maintenance than that monoculture of a grass lawn, less mowing and watering. I know that Ashley said that she got some eco lawn seeds. She's gotten it from Down to Earth. So that's an option.
Yeah, the photo there is from ptlawnseed.com, which also sells it, but you can buy that brand. It's a Portland-based company, but they've kind of carefully cultivated their seed mixes for Oregon, kind of Willamette Valley. So you can buy a lot of their seed mixes at Down to Earth. And yeah, I'll just throw out that we were talking about dandelions and flatweed earlier. If you've got a lot of flowers going on in your yard, you're not going to really notice the dandelions as like standing out as a sore thumb so much if they're going to mixed in with all these other things going on. So yeah, I've been using this specific mix in my house and slowly getting my grass replaced with an eco lawn.
Awesome. A meadowscape is a similar idea, but it's more about planting native meadow grasses and wildflowers, which again help pollinators, birds, beneficial insects. And you can use different colors of flowers, different structures and sizes of plants. And another benefit is that, you know, those native meadow species, they're drought resistant, they're adapted to the local climate because they're native, and they're also deep rooted, which is really great for your soil. Rain gardens, you're probably familiar with. They mimic nature by funneling the water that runs off from rooftops, yards, and streets, which is especially helpful if there are pesticide residues or other harmful things in that storm water runoff, because the water then goes to rain garden, which is a low-lying place in the landscape that has plants in there like sedges that are adapted to wetter soils and can help to filter out some of those pollutants, which is great for the environment. I'm sure we've all seen rain gardens more and more lately in parking lots and next to the street and other commercial areas where they're often more required now. And it's nice also going around Eugene neighborhoods to see some small rain gardens in people's yards too.
Mhm. A lot of hills in the friendly neighborhood, so it's a good it's a good one to use for all those rain
Yeah,
ones.
definitely. And then the last alternative I wanted to talk about was herbal lawns. So this could be an option if you're looking to entirely replace a grass lawn, or this is also a good option for if you have a grass lawn and you see some weeds or herbs popping up. You could encourage some of them to grow rather than removing them. So there are lots of herbs that we might think of as weeds that actually have a lot of medicinal or edible uses. And when they're flowering, they're great for pollinators. So a few herbs that you might encourage or plant in your lawn are chickweed, dandelion, plantain, self-heal, thyme, white yarrow, and clover.
Great. I just linked an article we wrote recently about herbal lawns too. That's got a little more detail if you guys want to check that out.
Awesome. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Ashley to talk about some more DIY recipes and techniques that you can use.
Great. I will also mention for the lawns, a lot of these grasses or herbal lawn or a meadowscape, it's going to grow a lot taller. So you can choose to mow a small area if you want to have some kind of turf area to hang out in, and then let a lot of the rest of it grow and provide pollinator habitat. One tip I do have though is for residential areas, if you're going to do it in your front yard, there's this perception maybe that you're just being lazy and letting your yard go crazy. And so one way that I've seen work well is to just do a small mow strip, like right out front, next to the sidewalk if you've got one, or just like the very front, because then it looks really intentional, like you've created this on purpose. You've mowed this little small area. It draws attention to the fact that this is really deliberate rather than an accident or neglect. So just throwing that out there too. So yes, DIY recipes and techniques. So there are some pretty easy and low cost recipes you can throw together for some of these things. I'll give you a few examples and we've got more on our website. So first for weeds, in addition to using like a flame weeder that Laura mentioned or a steam weeder, you can use vinegar. This is kind of the most similar direct replacement for that Roundup glyphosate chemical. What you just need to find is a strong percentage vinegar. It's called horticultural vinegar. It's around 10 to 30% strength versus about 5% that you'll find in the grocery store. So you do need to go to like a garden supply store, someplace like that to find it. You want to be careful handling it because it is acidic. It can hurt your skin. It cause a small burn or rash on your skin if you get it on your skin. So wear gloves and then mix a little bit of dishwashing soap with it so it'll stick to the leaves. And then if you're doing a large area, you can add dye so you remember where you sprayed. I've never actually done that, but I've heard it can be helpful if you have a large area, but I generally just stay away from adding more, things to it than I need. So you just mix it up in the spray bottle and spray your weeds. It's going to be more effective on a dry day. And it takes about 24 hours. It's going to be killing off the leaves rather than the root. So glyphosate is going to get down to the root. This will kill off the leaves and then eventually the roots will die too when it has nothing to provide it the sun that it needs. So it works pretty quickly. I've used it a lot on, hardscapes is where it's most effective. So like on those sidewalk cracks we were talking about at the beginning of the call, if you've got a bunch of stuff growing up on the front of your sidewalk and the city's getting upset or your neighbors are getting upset because you've got a bunch of weird stuff growing in the cracks in front of your house, this is a good use for that. I have done flame weeding in front of my house too, but I got a little self-conscious with like people and cars going by seeing me torch the street. So yeah, this is a good alternative for that. Insecticidal soap. So this is one of my favorites. I pretty much always have some around because I use Dr. Bronner's soap a lot, which is Castile soap. It's the main ingredient in insecticidal soap. And it works by breaking down basically the fatty acids in it, break down the bug's exoskeleton. But I use insecticidal soap also as just my household cleaner. So I mix a little Dr. Bronner's with water. I have it in a spray bottle all the time at home for cleaning off my counters. And then if I've got any aphid problems on my kale or I'm seeing other tiny bugs in my garden, I just grab it from under my sink, walk out and spray my plants off with it. It does kind of wash off pretty quickly. So right now is a little bit trickier for a lot of things because we've got so much rain going on. But in the summer, this is a great option. You just want to be like making sure to flip up your leaves if you've got, you know, crevices that the bugs can hide in, and spray on it. It only works if you can spray the pest directly. So this is not a preventative. This is for when you see a pest outbreak that has occurred. And then it's, you know, it's just soap, so you can rinse off anything that you spray with it before you eat it. But if you are looking for more of a preventative, diatomaceous earth is another good solution. So this is made from fossilized water plant remains. And basically, if you look at it under a microscope, it's like tiny shards of glass. So bugs are going to avoid it if they see it. And if it does get on them, it kind of cuts up their body and it causes them to kind of dehydrate and die. So you can use it as a barrier in a garden. If you've got a raised bed, you can sprinkle it around the outside of your bed or around some of your plants. If you want to prevent things that are crawling on the ground level, you can also puff it directly onto the plant, and it'll kind of stay on there for a little while until it gets wet. So this is another one that works really well when it's dry, but as soon as it gets wet, is basically not going to work anymore. It's all natural and is safe for people and pets as long as you don't breathe it in. So that's the only real kind of hazard there is you got to be careful. You don't want to breathe it. It will damage your lungs. So, you know, if you're going to puff it onto your plants, you can do that with a tea strainer or a turkey baster, but, you know, wear a mask or hold your breath while you're doing it because you don't want to breathe it in. But yeah, this one is great for a lot of uses, a lot of different bugs. I've used it quite a bit. And then we can do some traps for different kinds of pests in our yards and gardens. Slugs is one. You can bury basically a small dish in the ground and fill it with beer, and the slugs or snails will crawl into that and drown. I kind of hope that they're having a happy death in there, but I've used this quite a bit, and I always, like, as soon as I notice some trails in my garden, I put some of those around, and I'll come out the next morning and they'll be full of slugs. So this works well. I don't know if we, just looking ahead at our slides, we didn't include any more traps, but we've got some others on our website, including like a fruit fly trap that you can make in your kitchen using a cone and some vinegar or wine. A sugar ant bait, which is similar to a trap, but it's will actually attract them and then they'll take the bait back to their colony and die. So we've got some good tips. I can find, when I pass it back to Laura, I'll actually find, we created a DIY video actually with 5 baits or traps that you can use at home. So I'll share that with you guys as well. But yeah, check out our website. We've got lots of tips. And then there's a lot of botanical oils out there. So this is, you know, similar to the Omri products that Laura mentioned earlier. They're going to be a little more expensive than synthetic chemicals, but they're going to, you know, not harm the environment or other wildlife and pets and people by using them. So, you know, Down to Earth has a lot of good options. If you go to their garden section, they can give some good recommendations for some of these kind of botanical, natural options for products. Is that all for me? Oh, and then, yeah, there's just a few examples there, some of the oils and what they can do. So neem oil is great. It's used for a lot of things. So that one is kind of one of the gold stars that I recommend. And then mint oil is also a great one because it's a repellent in addition to killing off some of the bugs. So I have kind of a mint oil spray that I just kind of spritz around my house in the summer when I see pests, especially ants coming in. Kind of repels them from wanting to come in, spiders and ants and those kinds of things. So I'm going to pass back to Laura. We'll finish up and then let you guys ask us some questions if you have them.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share a few ways that you can get more involved with NCAP if you've enjoyed the discussion today and want to do more to reduce your use of pesticides. So first is our pesticide-free pledge. Ashley, when she can, is going to put a link in the chat. You can click that and go to the page on our website to take the pledge. It's really quick and easy to do. Basically, if you want to commit to doing what you can to reduce your use of pesticides and protect the health of people and the environment, it's pledging to do that. So take the pesticide-free pledge on our website. Hundreds of people have already taken it. We would love for you to, and also tell other folks that you know about it. Second thing I want you to know about is to sign up for updates from NCAP. We send an email newsletter once a month, which has lots of great things in it. And we might send you another 1 or 2 emails a month, but nothing that'll fill your inbox up too much. We send out updates about different policy related to pesticides that you should know about, actions that you can take to help change policy, sign petitions. We have updates about our different projects throughout the Northwest, ways that you can volunteer, and events and trainings coming up related to pesticides. So that's just a really great way if you want to learn more about what you're doing, about what NCAP is doing and how to reduce your use of pesticides. Go ahead and sign up for a newsletter on our website as well. And then lastly, we have a new pest and weed management consultation service. So we, over the years, have gotten and still get a lot of people who contact us at NCAP who have specific pest or weed problems that they're dealing with and are looking to us for help. And we have a lot of great resources for free on our website, a lot there to check out, pesticide.org. But some folks maybe don't want to look through all that resources, or they just have a really specific problem that they're having more trouble with and need some more help. So you can schedule a time with one of our expert staff who will do a little research about your pest or weed problem that you're dealing with, and then do a virtual consultation with them. And it's a really affordable service offered at a sliding scale. So I encourage you to check that out if you have some serious pest or weed issues that you don't want to use pesticides for. All right, so thank you all so much for listening to the presentation. We're really glad to be here. You can, oh, it's black now. Please go ahead and go on our website and check out the resources there. And you can also email us at info@pesticide.org if you have further questions. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can open it up for your questions now.
I actually just see one from Margie in the chat, which is sort of timely because it's something we've been looking into. So the question is, how are local waterways like Amazon Creek doing, levels of undesirable chemicals, et cetera? So we actually have been in contact with a professor at U of O who's doing a project about Amazon Creek, and I don't know if he's got anything public yet. I could see if I could share it with you guys later, anything that he has ready to share. But the film, they're putting together this kind of short documentary video where they're going to follow the creek from the headwaters all the way to Monroe and see what the chemical load looks like at various places. We know for sure that there is an increase when it's like going through an industrial area. But we don't really have a lot of data yet about before that and then how persistent it is in the water afterwards. So there has been some testing done right in the urban area or industrial area where there's a lot of like factory stuff going on. And so I could find you some links. So there is some data for that. And then we've been trying to get, we actually tried to get some funding to do some water quality testing, and we were not successful at the grant application we put in. So we're still trying to get some money put together so that we could do some testing. And I know Beyond Toxics that you guys were talking about earlier, also is interested in doing some water quality testing of Amazon Creek. So if either one of our groups can get some money figured out, we're both interested in kind of teaming up to look at Amazon Creek and seeing what's going on. Like, is there chemicals early from the headwaters end? Are we seeing runoff from other places, or is it more just that kind of industrial pollution that's coming in? And if we can follow it all the way into Monroe, then we're seeing, you know, potentially impacts to water, drinking water, because that it's feeding into their groundwater and, you know, wells in the more rural areas. And so yeah, there's not a whole lot of data yet is sort of the short answer there, but I can find you some links to the information that's available.
I wonder if there's any room for citizen scientists in any of that
Yeah.
stuff as well. I mean, because there's a lot of people that live along the Amazon.
Yep.
At least for this end of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think there could be, you know, if you want to do anything as far as, you know, publishing information, then you have to follow some pretty specific guidelines on how water's collected. But if people are just interested, you can always, you know, go collect some water samples near your house and send it in. It can be a little bit expensive if you're testing for a lot of things. That's the only downfall to that.
And then there was another question for herbal lawns. Do non-native species work as good as native, such as prunella, self-heal?
Yeah, self-heal is great. Yeah, so for herbal lawns, a lot of the herbs that we're talking about in herbal lawns are considered weeds because they are really good at growing and can come in and take over an arid landscape or one where the soil health is really low. I mean, weeds generally are good at surviving when other plants can't, because they're adapted to being able to survive it without a lot of, you know, nutrients or ideal conditions. And so, you know, as far as like having some of these herbal weeds versus grass, I mean, they're often just as well suited and will grow well. They provide, you know, there's a lot of really great species that are not necessarily native to this area that are good at feeding pollinators. So I'm not necessarily against other kinds of species, but I do encourage people whenever you can to introduce some native species to your area. Yeah, I think it can be beneficial all around to have more of our native plants in abundance. So, you know, nothing against things like lavender or other pollinator plants that kind of can grow anywhere, but finding some of those that are really specific to this area are also great.
I had a question about the herbal lawns. Does it look good all year round? Does it stay green the way that a lawn would here in the valley?
Yeah, I think that they stay looking nice in, you know, August, when you don't see a lot of great lawns. I mean, unless someone's really using a lot of water at the end of August, most lawns that I see, at least in Eugene, are looking pretty brown. Whereas, you know, an herbal lawn or a lawn with some drought resistant species or clovers are going to be more green. So, and then in the winter, I mean, they're not going to be flowering. So they're not beautiful as far as all the color that's going on in the spring and summer months, but they're green. So, I mean, it is a bit of a personal preference, a lot of this. And so, you know, part of what we like to encourage people to do is, you know, think about, you know, what a beautiful lawn looks like. And we've kind of become accustomed to a green monoculture grass lawn as being, you know, the height of a good steward of your home and garden and yard. And so just changing our perception about that, and it's going to take some time. But it is, you know, your own personal preference too. Like some of these, you might just not find them very attractive looking, and that's okay too. So, you know, I would do some searching to see what plants look like before you put them in, and see if you like living with them year round.
Like maybe doing it in sections. Like,
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
like the most strip suggestion,
Yes.
data smaller
Yeah,
area.
that's a great idea. Definitely. Yep.
There was a question from Barbara in the chat. I'm wondering if there has been any effective techniques for getting rid of invasive horsetail.
I'm not as familiar. Yeah, I mean, generally, I could do a little searching and get back to people, but for most of these like really invasive species, blackberry is very different, but that's another one that is very difficult to manage. A lot of it has to do with encouraging a native species that can grow abundantly, or even if it's not native, but one that is well suited to that specific spot. So whatever your sunshade, to get a lot of water coming through or not, finding some things that can grow really well and encouraging those, and just doing some pretty aggressive weeding for a short period of time until these other species are well established. So I don't have a really specific good answer for horsetail, but that's sort of my general recommendation for trying to get rid of an invasive species.
I'll throw an idea out there.
Yeah,
I think it needs a lot of water, so I'd be tempted to redirect the drainage or fill it in somehow and kind of dry it out.
yeah, and then you could plant some things that are more drought resistant and provide minimal water, and the drought resistant plants hopefully can outcompete them then. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, Pam.
Oh, I guess I just wanted to say, like, lawns don't have to be so bad. I mean, I never have fertilized my grass. I've never put pesticides on anywhere on my property. But I have a really green grass, and because I just leave the clipping. I do mow, but I leave it. I grow high, let the grass stay pretty high, and when there's flowering stuff like the dandelions, I used to try to get rid of them. Now I just live with them, and they didn't take over. They're there, but they didn't take over. Same with the daisies and stuff, but you just kind of weed whack around them a little bit and leave the flowers. But I have not found the lawn to be a problem. I don't water it. It goes brown, but it always comes back green in the spring. And it's, I just don't think they don't have to be evil.
Yeah.
And then as for the blackberries too, we had the alley behind me was thick with blackberries, and my neighbor and we just went in and finally we mowed them. We just kept them mowed, and after a few years they just haven't really come back. And so I don't know if if you just stay on it for a while and keep them.
Yeah, a lot of plants like that will store nutrients in the roots, and so they'll keep popping up. But if you are really regularly mowing it, eventually it will run out of the nutrients that are stored, and it won't be able to continue to send up.
It took like 3 years, 2 years.
Yeah.
You're very lucky, Pam.
Has a question.
Yeah.
I was,
Go, Margie.
okay, sorry.
Go ahead, Margie. I'll be after you. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was just curious. I'm asking in person because I don't know how to write it or say it. But like when you were talking about the
neonicotinoids. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And that how, some plants may have that within their soil structure and that kind of thing. So if I happen to be planting those, does that go into the soil, or is it pretty much just absorbed quickly by that plant, or what?
Yeah, it won't kind of come back out into the soil. So it's something that will go into the soil and absorb into the plant. And then if it's moved, or if you bought it from a nursery and it had been treated, it's not going to continue to contaminate the ecosystem other than through the release of its pollen or nectar, or if you like a bug eats the plant leaves themselves. Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question. It might be a little off topic, but regarding rodents like mice that get into your car and eat your wiring and make a nest in your air filter and things like that. I've heard of peppermint spray. I've heard of sound machines, strobe lights, fresh cab, like hemlock bark or whatever. Do you have a recommendation, or do you guys even deal with that kind of stuff?
Honestly, what I usually recommend is using traps and just figuring out like some good techniques for them, and which can take some trial and error. But some of the tips that I've given are, put a trap out and put some bait in it, but don't set it. So like if it's a snap trap or something else like that, let them get used to it first and kind of, like share the info with their buddies that it's a good place to get food before you set it. And then, or having like a few in a row so that you know, if the one of them doesn't quite work out, they're all kind of coming back to that same location. You know, some people are not happy about using trap methods or things that can cause a lot of pain for the animal, but yeah, we also don't want them eating the wires in our cars for sure. I haven't really had a lot of success in like repellents as far as peppermint for rodents. I mean, they're just a little more persistent than that. So,
Okay, thanks.
yeah.
Do you have any idea what might be the most pervasive herbicide or pesticide used in residential gardens in Eugene? Has that ever been calculated? Or?
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen a study in Eugene specifically. You know, I think glyphosate is still the most prominently used herbicide across the country, and I still see it being used pretty heavily in Eugene.
Is that Roundup? Or
Yeah,
is it-
Roundup.
Yeah.
Roundup, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd agree too. That's a shame. So what can we do to help turn people on to the need for not using it?
Yeah, one of the things that I recommend is putting some signage up and trying to encourage, you know, you can go talk to your neighbors for sure, but also putting some signs up. I mean, you can buy some at a lot of stores like Down to Earth. We do have some on our website too that you can buy. But basically just like letting people know, especially if you are proud of your urban lawn or really like what you've got going on that's visible to the street. For me, it took me a while before I was ready to put a sign up because I felt like it just looked like neglect versus very managed. But once I got it to a place where I felt good about it, I have a sign up that says pesticide free, safe for people, pets, and pollinators. So people know like what I have going on may look a little different than you're used to, but there's a reason for it. And so, you know, just trying to encourage dialogue and conversation. Yeah, I mean, we do have like handouts. If you want to get more aggressive, you could like go knock on doors or hand out information to people. But also, you know, sharing information at community groups like this is another great way. You know, talking to people, helping spread the information.
I also wanted to take a moment to thank you, your organization, for being here so long. I remember some of us were here in the 70s when it started, and I remember a lot of those no spray signs popping up, and all the effort and mobilization that went into fighting a lot of battles here, and just really impressed with it. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. We still are in contact with some of the founders of NCAP, and I'm grateful for the work that they did to get it started for sure.
Margie's got another question here. Cecelia, I can't quite read it.
Sure. It says, is NCAP still involved with folks that are being affected by aerial spraying? It isn't in town, but close to our urban. I guess, is it in town or close to our urban boundaries?
Yeah, so a lot of the kind of aerial, well, I mean, there's a few different ways or a few different reasons that aerial spraying is occurring. So there's still aerial spraying occurring on logging property. One of our early victories was actually getting it banned on federal forest land. So federal forest land is no longer being managed by using aerial spraying. You know, there's still logging and there's all that going on, but there's not aerial spraying on federal land. There's a lot of state land and a lot of privately owned land that is still being managed however they want to manage it, which includes aerial spraying. So there is some of that going on. We do provide kind of help to people that reach out to us, but there's actually some other great partners in the area that we've sort of been like stepping forward and stepping back on different issues where we have a lot of expertise or where people have momentum. And so Beyond Toxics and Oregon Wild have been really great advocates for a lot of the forest practices. And so we sort of just support them in the work that they are doing in that area for the logging area. We are continuing to work with farms and trying to reduce the spray happening, you know, either by tractor or by airplane on farmland that's impacting neighboring communities. And so that is part of some of our program area in our campaign work is to try and encourage farms to change their practices, and even if they are not interested in being an organic farm, at least adopting some of these more organic type practices to reduce their pesticide use and protect the workers on their farm from being exposed.
We have a question, or your hand up is Counselor Semple. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you. This was great. I wasn't expecting such a fun topic. I moved to Oregon, to Corvallis in 1983 to study forest ecology at OSU. And NCAP was one of the very first organizations I was ever aware of in Oregon. So it's kind of like, ooh, coming home. And I took a lot of forest management classes because my undergrad was back east. So kind of catch up a little bit. And boy, there was a lot of glyphosate, not glyphosate discussions going on in that building. My question is, what do you think about praying mantises? My grandma back in the East Coast used to have this guy would come every spring and drop off some praying mantises, and then he would come back and get them. At least that's what she told me. But I think they eat a lot of insects.
They eat a lot of insects. So they are sort of beneficial. And there's a lot of beneficial bugs that you can introduce or attract that are only going to eat your pest bugs. And they're really great at eating your pests. And you know that they're going to keep your aphids under control. So like lacewings, ladybugs, great at that. Praying mantis is not very selective. They will eat anything.
Okay. Even my ladybugs that I brought.
They're going to eat your ladybugs.
Bag.
They're going to eat the beneficial bugs too. And so
Okay.
if you have an area that you know is just like lots of pests, there's nothing beneficial going on there, all you see are pests, you could put some praying mantises there and they do a great job. But yeah, just know that they're going to eat anything that they come across.
I don't know where to get them anyway. One showed up on my door last summer and I was all excited.
Yeah, it's fun to see them. It usually means if they're coming in naturally, that means you've got kind of a diverse ecosystem going on. So it's a good indicator of a healthy habitat, I think.
Well, thank you all for all your work all this time.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm seeing one other comment about the logging and why is it considered necessary to spray logging areas? So it's easy for them that when you clear cut an area, a lot of weeds are going to come back and they're going to outcompete the seedlings. And so they want to keep the weeds from growing until the trees have reached a certain age and are more able to outcompete the weeds. And so it's just a practice that's done when you clear cut. So yeah, there are some other ways to manage, although, generally the whole kind of process is not really one that's based in a healthy ecosystem. So it's hard to manage weeds when you're, destroying everything within an area and then replanting. So it's tricky. It's tricky to recommend some good alternatives for that kind of practice. Yeah, Pam.
Yeah, just a couple comments. It was neat to see the old picture and that was actually, I think the NCAP office is up in the Growers Market building. I think it was next to Hodad's, because I know that the Hodad's kind of, I think some of the people from Hodad's helped start the thing along with some other folks, Norma. But and I think the aerial spraying was one of the inspirations for that, and use of thiram maybe on the trees that were being planted. I also wanted to comment, I remember when I was first gardening, my first year here, I bought a box of ladybugs and I put them in the garden and I never saw them again. They flew away and that was that. My garden is full of ladybugs now, but I don't know what attracted them, but I've got a lot of them now. So
yeah, you need to have some food for them. So if you release them at a time where they just didn't see enough readily available to eat, they would leave. And so if you've got a good healthy mix of pest and prey bug in your yard, you'll see more ladybugs for sure. So.
Well, I got them because of the aphids, but then later I figured out you can wash them off. But and also aphids seem to come when your plants are weak.
Yes. Yep.
I had a question about your comment about, where is my question? When we're learning about pest management, you said, it's like we need to improve the balance so So do you have some sites that talk about some of that stuff? I mean, or recommendations of places to go? So it's, I guess it's understanding the pest, right? And knowing what they need and trying to, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it can be so nuanced. It's a little tricky. But I would say if you're seeing a lot of pests, you could do a little research, or you could, talk to us as well. But you could do a little research on what those pests prefer, and then try and change the environment. So to encourage, either more species or different plants that maybe they're less attracted to. Laura mentioned briefly companion planting. So that's introducing a plant that will attract predators next to a plant that might have a pest for it. So if they can come and eat the nectar and the pollen for a while they're waiting for the pests to show up, then they'll be around. And then when there are pests that hatch, you've already got some beneficial predators hanging out nearby on these plants. So, I mean, a lot of it's trial and error, but it is a lot also kind of looking at your specific area and seeing like what kinds of plants you have growing, what kind of pests you're seeing, and then seeing how you can modify your plants to encourage some changes. But yeah, it can just vary so widely. It's I don't know that we have a lot of really great resources on specifically how to do that, because it is so different based on the area that you're in, what you have growing. We're a Northwest organization, so we've got a lot of different zones as far as what grows in the climate in our 3 states too. So,
Are there any other questions, comments? All right, well, I really appreciate you guys, Ashley and Laura. This has been terrific. Thanks for sharing all your knowledge and taking the time to be with us and answer all our questions.
yeah,
Really
thanks for having us. We've kind of missed being out in the community for the last couple of years. We used to do so many, in-person events. And so it's nice to connect even when it's virtually, especially in the Eugene community where we're located. So
yeah. Well, we appreciate all the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for coming and sharing.
Appreciate all the good questions.